humid. So that's
Cool.
Florida.
You ready to kick this off, man?
Let's do it.
All right. So Jeffrey Wolf,
What's going on?
going on the Flexible.
As I'm now known. That's right.
That's an awesome tag, man.
Thank you.
We've been connected for a long time now, man.
Yeah. 4 years? 5?
5 years.
5 years, something like that? Yeah. Yeah, it's been a long time.
It's been a long time. I remember when I first connected with you, just like looking at some of your videos and posts, shredded tan guy on the beach, pumping up bar muscle ups just all day.
That's right. That's all I did.
Yeah, this guy is nuts. And we started connecting more, and like the more I talked to you, the more I saw that you were really grasping onto all things, you know.
Right.
And we were getting involved in the same things together, the gymnastics, strength training, all that stuff. We connected pretty good that way, and
yeah,
it's been 5 years. All these conversations we've been having about training and the check-ins and everything, especially from your end, just the past year's been a bit crazy for me, but like all the check-ins you've been giving me, like, just with our connection on social media has really helped me out a lot, helped me get through some rough patches and stuff, but I really appreciate that.
Of course.
And I really thank you for sitting with me and talking shop for a little bit.
Anytime.
I got this, this new project on the go here. Just a web series where I want to connect with like-minded individuals like yourself and just kind of talk shop, go over some of the good things that you're doing and kind of, just share all the info, share the word, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I wanted to just kick things off obviously with talking about ATG.
Okay.
Athletic Truth Group.
Let's do it.
You guys, I feel like you guys are taking over the world right now. It's crazy.
It's been quite a ride. I met Ben probably, I've been with ATG a little over a year, but I probably met Ben a year prior to that. I was still working with Ashley at the Gymnastic Bodies affiliate. And Ben was another local gym, and at the time he had been training athletes, and something he's kind of been in for a long time. And so then a year ago I officially started with him, myself and then Derek, the other of the trio that I guess
Mr.
everyone's
Infinity?
kind of Mr. Infinity. Yeah. He doesn't age, that guy.
No, man.
It's crazy.
He's shredded.
He puts us all to shame, and he's like, I don't want to say twice our age, but he's a decade older than us at least, because Ben and myself are almost 30. So, yeah.
So I feel like at the time you and I were chatting a little bit, like Ben kind of started linking up with you because I feel like he was really inspired by a lot of the flexibility work you were doing.
Yeah, exactly. So Ben, when I first met Ben, we kind of exchanged back and forth with him. He kind of wanted to know a little bit at the time some of the gymnastic stuff that we were doing, and vice versa. We kind of were wanted to see what he was doing as far as just what his methods, his ways of working with athletes. He was a Poliquin guy, or is a Poliquin guy. And when I say that, I just mean that he's one of Poliquin's many mentored athletes or coaches. And so, a lot of his beliefs stem from that, and from Poliquin's philosophies or methods or whatever you want to call them. So we exchanged kind of back and forth for a little bit. And he was most impressed by, I think, ranges of certain things I was able to do and get into, that I guess he had seen other athletes struggle with, certain movements that to me were super easy as far as getting into the position. RDLs and just think I was able to do ranges that he'd never seen before, you know. So that kind of got his brain ticking a little bit, I think. And of course, you know, those traditional strength coaches, like they don't know anything about flexibility.
No.
You know, most guys, if they even tell you that you should stretch, you know, it's 15, 30 seconds a stretch if you're lucky at the end of a session. You know, you might stretch for a few minutes and that's kind of it. Or you know, the old team sport stretches out on the field where you're just like kind of moving around but not really, you know, actually stretching. So
bring that heart rate.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that he had some, you know, there were certain stretches, you know, some quad stretches, you know, just your generic stuff. But really diving deep into it was kind of an unknown territory for him. And I guess he's someone who could see the benefits right away. You didn't have to convince him that flexibility was important. From where he sat, just watching what I was able to do was enough for him. And that's ultimately what got us to link up and where I am today, I guess. So.
Yeah. So can you just talk a little bit about your role right now with ATG and like what you've been doing with the group and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So my role essentially is to create and overlook all of the flexibility, I guess if you want to call them routines, exercises, movements within the system, which I've compiled from everyone. I mean, you know, Summers, Ito, Emmett, Kit Laughlin, Thomas Kurz, Katie Breer. I mean, the list goes on as far as everyone that I've kind of followed over the years and looked to as far as increasing range of motion and flexibility. So that's kind of my role is implementing that with our athletes. So what a lot of people may or may not know about ATG is we're not your typical gym as far as, you know, football or that kind of like powerlifting culture. We train a lot of athletes. The majority of our athletes come to us either really young, so they're young guys, high school, college, that are either have been injured or are kind of dealing with some chronic pain, whether you want to, you know, call that injury or not, just some knee soreness or ankle soreness or shoulder soreness. These aren't gymnasts, these aren't contortionists, these aren't martial artists or any come from any discipline which is really known for their flexibility. These are all football, basketball, hockey, you know, traditional American team sport kind of guys. So flexibility is not really in the repertoire for these guys. So
right.
Yeah. So I'm kind of their first exposure, I guess you could say, to what real flexibility is. I remember when I did my first flexibility class, I guess you could say, at ATG. This was back a year ago. We did some classes. And the first time I said, okay, we're going to hold this stretch for 2 minutes. And just everyone in the room just gawked and gasped. They were like, what? 2 minutes? And yeah, I was like, yes. You know, they were thinking I was going to say, oh, you know, like 15 seconds or whatever. When I said 2 minutes, they all kind of, I think that's when it hit them that, oh, no, we're really actually about to stretch, not just, you know,
real stretching,
move around. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. I mean, obviously I have other, you know, capabilities as far as strength programming for traditional strength lifts through my own research, obviously through Paula Quinn and many other guys in the industry. But my niche within ATG is kind of the flexibility. It's what I do. So
yeah, it was really cool for me too, seeing you start off with them, and you know, we were chatting a little bit about what you were going to do, and I know some of the like a lot of the athletes you're working with are basketball players.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are like, look, I've never been the shortest guy in the room. Okay, yeah. I'm always the shortest guy in the room now. I mean, I'm 6'1". I'm always, and I look short compared to these guys. I mean, we're talking 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", 6'9". I mean, these are big, long boys. I mean, they're tall.
So yeah, like I remember thinking, you were telling me a little bit about it, and I was looking at it, and I was, you know, obviously wishing you all the best, but at the same time, I was like, man, he's gonna make these guys flexible. It's just
Yeah.
it's not to say that it's something that can't be done, but I haven't seen it done the way you've been doing. With guys like that, you don't see these guys move in those ranges. Even when I started out, a lot of what was being taught or being told to me was to, look at femur length or look at different things like that and try not to move through full range with these individuals, or it's not that, or saying that they're unable to because of their height.
Right.
So it's been really, as much as I've had the journey in flexibility and have helped people with it, it's been really cool watching you unlock this flexibility and range motion in these giants.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I'll emphasize again, like these guys are not, these guys aren't even remotely close and interested in being flexible, at least not in the beginning. It's, flexibility is like this goal that's achieved by, yogis. And again, like people interested in gymnastics and maybe your Olympic weightlifter, if they're a smart Olympic weightlifter and if they're a good Olympic weightlifter, those are probably the most brutish kind of guys that are actually into flexibility. But for the most part, men aren't into flexibility, period. It's kind of seen as like this feminist kind of quality. Like, oh, men aren't flexible, women are flexible. And then add team sport and like powerlifting, at least American powerlifting culture into the mix, which is like basically how all athletes are trained here. It's just the priority of it is so low, if it even exists, if it's even a priority. So it's definitely been a challenge, because unlike some of the athletes I've worked with before, who are kind of already sold on it, or it was part of their goal to achieving other goals that they had, these guys come in and they've either been told not to stretch, that stretching's bad for them, that'll make them slow, that'll make them not be able to jump as high, that'll injure them. They've been told everything but to stretch. So it's definitely a hurdle. I don't think it's as much anymore a year into what we're doing and the presence that we've made online.
Yeah.
Now the results are, we're approaching 1,000 members online. Crazy. And it's pretty cool because now day after day we're starting to see the results. We're starting to see the stories and get the messages and the text that these athletes that have been told not to do all these things, and now they're finally they found these group of guys that are crazy enough to say, no, you absolutely need to do this. And now they're and kind of going against everything that everyone's been taught. At least, I can only speak for the way people are taught in school and stuff here, but so they put their trust in us. And I think in the past year, it's definitely like 15 or 16 athletes who have achieved at least one of their splits: front split, pancake, or middle split. I have probably about 4 or 5 that have all 3, and then quite a few that have like 2 of them or whatever, and that's just in 1 year. And that's in gym. So as far as our athletes online, it's hard to even say, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So
very cool.
Yeah.
So I guess just talking about some of the athletes you're working with these specific measurements, has there been things you've noticed with that type of person where you've kind of had to approach things a bit differently, or have you find some commonalities amongst them versus, I guess, general population?
Yes. I think the commitment level's there.
Mm-hmm.
Once they buy into it, they're committed. Any athlete who's invested in their body, when they see the benefits, you don't have to do much more. I feel like with some more, I guess, Gen Pop clients or people that I've worked with, it's a constant, you have to constantly motivate them. You have to constantly kind of coax them into the reason why they're doing it, reminding them why they're doing it. Whereas an athlete is dedicated. If they're a smart athlete, And you know, most of these guys that I work with are. That's why they're at ATG. You know, they know that their body is their income, and you got to take care of it. And it's not just lasting 1 or 2 years in the league. It's or in any professional league. How can I push 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years in professional sports? I mean, you're talking a lot of money when you can extend the life expectancy of your body. So the commitment is there. If anything, I have to tell guys to take it easy. I think that's probably the biggest, is telling these guys to back off, how to back off, when to back off, when not to do too much. That's probably the biggest hurdle with these guys, I would say, compared to general population. General population is going to do the least amount of work to get the results. And I mean, hey, I feel you. I'm kind of the same way, especially at this point in my life, right? So the least I can do to get the results I need, the better. But athletes, you know, they're just balls to the wall, man. It's just like, I'll do it all. I'll do it for 4 hours a day. I mean, I get guys messaging me like, dude, I stretch every day for, you know, X amount of hours. And I'm like, let's back it off a little bit. Let's take this back a notch and really explain like what's happening. So that way you can see why maybe doing this every day for a little bit, you'll probably see progress. For the long term, it's probably not a good idea. So that's the biggest thing, I think.
Yeah. And I think too, what you're teaching them is when you start training flexibility the way it's supposed to be trained, it's kind of like strength training.
Exactly.
You know, people that have thought flexibility to be like cool down at the end of your workout kind of approach, when they start doing it, they get so excited. They still approach it with that same mentality. Whereas, you know, they're going to be in for a wake-up call when they wake up with that crazy DOMS from doing adductor work. They're sore for a week, right? So
yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's one of what you just said right there, I think, is the biggest key. You know, how I viewed flexibility, I'll say prior to Emmett, you know, I love Emmett Lewis, man. Emmett Lewis is like, the dude's amazing. And I think one of the biggest things I've picked up from him is to treat your flexibility like strength training, and strip it down as much as you can. You know, really the antagonist muscle, just the way he kind of explains it. That's what really indicated with me. And working with really strong athletes, you know, getting them to sit in 20 stretches for an hour is a lot more difficult than, you know, it's doing some more of like the weighted mobility and stuff, you know, 3 to 5 sets in your traditional programming scheme, you know, maybe supersetted together. However, they just visualize it a little bit differently than, you know, opposed to like a flow of some sorts of different stretches that they go in. And we use both, but I think that working with strong guys, the weighted mobility and stuff, and a lot of the more dynamic mobility and flexibility work is a lot better to get it to stick. I think the interesting thing is that we use passive stretching, and I know like recently there's this whole like anti-passive stretching thing out there. It seems like, I don't know where that came from. I guess there's got to be trends for everything, right? But you know, quote unquote passive stretching has been around for so long. Like it's kind of a hard thing to argue, and of course, like, application's everything, right? Like doing anything and not knowing exactly why you're doing it or the application to which you're trying to put it towards is very important. Like, don't do it just to do it. I mean, or do it just to do it. You're probably going to have more benefits than if you didn't. But there has been this like anti-passive stretching thing I've seen kind of going around, and I think it's a little misled. You know, when you deal with athletes that are predominantly fast twitch, and these guys are go, 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 and they don't know when to stop, and their nervous system is so strung out because they're constantly pushing themselves to the limit, they're constantly lifting heavy weights, they're playing contact sports. I mean, these guys need an hour of just breathing and relaxing and passive stretching, even if it's just to sleep better. You know, it's I think the impact on the nervous system and just allowing these guys to actually that's probably the other biggest barrier is teaching these guys how to actually breathe.
Right.
You get these guys to try to like just breathe, and it's like it's pulling teeth. It's nearly impossible, and that's probably the biggest barrier to overcome. Initially, teaching these guys flexibility is breathing and why it's important. So that's always fun too.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right with the passive stretching thing. I mean, I've been getting a lot of that too in terms of my beliefs, and sometimes you believe always strongly in what got you there.
Right.
I mean, that worked, and I mean, it's always good to look into all the avenues as you're starting to get there, and I am definitely taking my flexibility these days more into a strength direction, but I've also created a very large passive range to be able to do that.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not sure where that's plaguing from, and for the most part, I don't see a lot of these people that would be indicating that passive is wrong actually have a passive range themselves.
Right.
So, I mean, it's an interesting argument, but there's definitely both of those have to be there in my opinion.
100%. I think it is weird, and I don't know where it stems from, and I don't want to get into the drama of it. I mean, guys got to sell their programs, and you got to sell your methods. I get it. You got to feed yourself and your family, and hopefully we're all trying to do it in a way that's like ethical, and I think the biggest thing we need to understand is that there's more than one way to skin a cat, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like do what works for you, but don't bash the way somebody else did it just because it's not the way you did it. Like it's ridiculous, and of course there's benefits to passive stretching, and people link me articles all the time. Oh, look what this study said of these 12 guys who 6 stretched before they sprinted and 6 didn't, and the guys that stretched before they sprinted ran slower, and it's like, cool. So you have like 12 guys, 12 guys, 6 of which, it's like such a small control. There's no way to say like, I can find a science research paper that backs up almost anything, if you really want to look for it. So it doesn't really, what's your experience? What's your experience with athletes? What results have you produced? Not what did you read in a book or what did your teacher tell you, or, those aren't the people that I look to for answers. The people I look to for answers are the guys out there that are producing results. And I think even Poliquin was kind of ridiculed for years because he did things that I guess were kind of against what the science community was saying. And he was kind of seen as like this crazy old man who's just like, no one knows what he's talking about. But it's hard to argue now that he's not one of the, if not one of the, the best, if not one of the best strength coaches in the world. And I think just like anything, you have to kind of ignore the naysayers, and he has more than a long enough track record to prove that he knew what he was talking about. And so when I get these kids that come to me and they're like, hey man, like, my basketball coach told me that I shouldn't stretch. And I'm like, okay, can your basketball coach touch his toes? No, he probably can't even wash his own back, and he's telling you not to stretch. It's just because he doesn't actually know. He has no idea. So, it's somebody probably just told him that it's bad for him, so he didn't stretch. So now he's telling you, but you have knee pain or, back pain or whatever. And I've never had a guy come in with any of these kind of problems and be flexible. It's the last thing. It's the last thing they come in with. These guys are super strong. These guys are super fast. They jump really high. And usually their mobility is just garbage. It's bad. And so we stretch. And on top of many other things in our system, but they stretch and they feel better. I mean, imagine that. It's not like I don't need a scientific thesis to tell me that. I work with athletes every day who feel the effects positively of doing it.
Right.
So yeah, it's an interesting argument. I don't really get involved. We do what we do and just let our work kind of speak for itself. We've been called out. We've been called out on like quite a few people on quite a few things. And results just speak for themselves, and we don't get involved in that. We just kind of keep our heads down and keep working, and so yeah.
I don't want to spend too much time on the basketball player thing, but in assessing their ranges and capabilities, have you found common trends among them, like with certain limitations that they might have?
Everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere. It's ankle. I mean, I'll say it starts from the feet up.
Right.
So these guys are jammed in shoes. A lot of these guys, especially at the level these guys are playing at, they've been playing their whole life. They've been playing since they were 5, 6 years old. I mean, they've probably been shooting a basketball since they were 2, but been playing games for years since they were 5 or 6. So you think like 15 years of your feet being crammed in basketball shoes, all this cutting back and forth on the floor, your toes are getting jammed in the toe box. I mean, a lot of these guys that I get in here, their toes don't even bend.
Right.
So that's kind of where we start. The guys stretch their toes and their ankles every single day. They stretch their feet and their ankles every single day because they're that tight. I've never seen feet, and people are like, tight feet? What is this? This is crazy. But tight feet, tight ankles, tight, and it just goes all the way up. Tight calves, tight quads, tight hip. I mean, but that's where it starts. And plantar fasciitis is like a one in a lot of the basketball players we get. Heel pain, foot pain, just that's probably one of the bigger ones. And of course, knee pain. Ben's talked extensively about knee pain in relation to basketball. I'm not really an expert. I'm not a basketball player. That's kind of the other thing that sets me apart from the other guys. So I've played basketball, but I'm not a basketball player. But you got to think like constant plyometrics with little to no full range of motion strength training, let alone any stretching. So over year after year after year, it's just your body gets tight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look at those, increase your vertical programs back in the day, everyone was getting all amped up on. It's just all plyometric.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to increase your vertical by just jumping without actually getting stronger in your base? I really like Ben's approach to that, really approaching the strength training side of it first.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's something that I never really paid attention to. And just quickly, because this isn't really about flexibility, but the interesting thing about it is that a lot of these guys have strong, powerful engines, but no brakes. So their hamstrings and their hips, their glutes are strong. Like these boys are strong. You put them on a sled and have them go backwards, it's like watching a baby giraffe being born. These guys, their knees are buckling everywhere. They try to turn sideways to like use the outside of their hips instead of using their quads. Ankles are super tight. So when they done pushing a sled, they just feel their Achilles because their ankles are so tight that even pushing a sled, they get an amazing stretch from it. So I guess a little bit about flexibility. It's actually a really great ankle stretch. So yeah, it's fascinating to watch, but it's like, imagine driving a Ferrari with no brakes, right? Good luck stopping. So yeah.
in structuring your flexibility with these guys, I'm assuming that they're either having a core flexibility day in itself, separate from some of the hard conditioning, hard strength, or you're spending time at the end of a session.
It's a little bit of it's kind of all the above. They'll stretch before, they'll stretch during, they'll stretch after, and they have separate days.
Right.
So it kind of just depends. We offer multiple programs at this point. So it's kind of just what are you doing, and everything's structured so it all blends well together. So yeah, like I said, like most guys, when they come in, the first thing they do is they're stretching their feet, their ankles, and their calves because, a lot of belief stems from anything up the chain is gonna come from those three places. And I've never seen one of these guys come in with perfect calf flexibility, perfect toe flexibility, or perfect ankle flexibility. None, not a single one. So that's where pretty much everyone starts. And then there'll be stuff sprinkled in. Sometimes we do it between exercises, very similar to the way Coach Summers like to do it. Sometimes we'll do it just after And then we have dedicated days where the athletes can just come in and they just stretch every hour on the hour. So that's what they come in and do, and that's all they do that day. Maybe a little cardio to warm up a little bit, but we're probably one of the only athletic training gyms in America where you're going to walk in, you're not allowed to touch weights, and you spend an entire day stretching. So, yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
We talk, you and I, a lot about structuring workouts, and I guess getting into the strength stuff that you guys are doing. You're splitting the body most days. So upper body, lower body. And I guess it must be specific to the individual, but like I think I know your training regime like the back of my head, just because
yeah, you probably do. You probably know it better than I do.
We just talk shop every day and kind of ask each other how it's going. But you want to talk a little bit more about how you structure your workouts? Yourself and.
Yeah, so my workouts are except for probably the past 3 or 4 weeks, are generally, it's a 4-day split, 2 uppers and 2 lowers. So I've kind of played with different things. At the end of the day, I think programs are good for focus. So you don't lose focus, which I've been guilty of. So when I write a program, I just know that, okay, I took the time to write this program, I'm going to do it. And, I think you can make a lot of progress just doing something without guidance. And some people can do that for a long time and progress. Some people can't do that for a very long time and progress. I mean, the art of programming really comes down to each individual. But I like a 4-day split, 2 uppers, 2 lowers. That leaves me 3 days in the week that I do some conditioning, do some cardio, sleds. I've been sprinting lately, and then stretching. So, yeah.
That's a good approach to have as a coach yourself too. I approach it in similar ways too, where you can really play with new ideas and new things. And at the end of the day, it's about constantly developing yourself as well. And I know you're the same as me, where you wouldn't probably ever present anything to anyone unless you've thoroughly broken it down yourself and really understood it and saw whether it was worth it for you or not as something you wanted to keep doing. So I think like having that approach too, where it's more like of a template base as a coach, really makes it easy to supplement new ideas, new things, so you can keep evolving yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's, Tim Ferriss is like, I don't listen to a lot of him anymore, but years ago I did. And of course, like, listen to all his stuff that he did with Coach Summers and Rob Wolf and all these guys kind of in the industry. And, what I like about Tim Ferriss is he's a guinea pig. And that's kind of what I am. I think it's very important, for a long time, a lot of, and I don't want people to get the idea that you have to be able to do something to be a good coach at it. Cause that's not true. I think there's a lot of people that make better coaches than they make athletes because they can conceptualize better than they actually are on the field of play. Or they're really good leaders or planners, or, there's certain things that I think make you a really good coach. But I think experience is a big one. And I think a lot of coaches, for me, I like to be able to walk the walk. You know what I mean? So if somebody comes in my gym and is like, hey, do the splits, or hey, you're the flexible, you get guys flexible, right? Well, yeah. Well, can you do the splits? Well, I want to be able to go, yeah. I don't want to go, maybe, or no, but hold on, let me go get my athlete who I taught who can do it. No, I want to be able to like do it myself. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what draws people to us over at ATG is we walk the walk. We are products of our method as much as all of our athletes are. Anything that you do, we've done, and we know it works. So, that's just kind of the approach that I like to take. Again, there's a lot of great coaches out there that probably can't do the things that they teach really well. and that's fine. It's just not my style. It's not our style at ATG. We really like to be all in. Like, you know, Derek is you know, he's 41. He walks the walk. You know, he'll out train any young guy coming in there, NBA, NFL. You know, I swear if he could show up to a combine and not have to worry about his age, you wouldn't know. He just moves that well, and the guy's still dunking at 40. I mean, and he's just getting better and better. I mean, I've seen him evolve over the past year. And he's got a long way to go, as we all do, but he's come such a long way, and it's so motivating to see. Like, what people don't think is, you know, I'm 30, almost 30, so I'm like, man, like, look at what he does at 41. Think of what you can do with 10 years of training.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you that people thought, oh, he plays college ball, right? This guy plays college. No, he's got two, like, basically full, you know, not full grown kids, but, you know, two teenagers. And this, I mean, it's kind of a magical thing to see. And, and this is something that we're doing with a lot of our athletes. These guys are, you know, try not to offend any of them, but, you know, I don't want to say washed up, but a lot of them are kind of moving towards the end of the careers, at least the ones that we've been with. And, you know, they're trying to find another year or two, you know, maybe make a couple more million, or, you know, play overseas, or, you know, the life of an athlete. You're always trying to keep it going as much as you can. And so that's a lot of the guys that we deal with, that, or really young guys that if they don't handle it now, you're not going to have a career, because you're going to be beat up by the time you get to the league. And we see these guys, they come into the NBA or the NFL promising, and then they're riddled with injuries, and then they just, you know, they don't live to their potential. If they would have just stretched, they probably wouldn't be where they are. So
that's awesome. The sleds, man.
Yes.
Like, in my powerlifting days, we used to play with them just on, like, rest days, but it was more just about, you know, a little bit of recovery and stuff. But I mean, what you guys are doing with sleds and bringing it back to, well, it's like the best conditioning tool I think you can utilize if you have access to one, and the facilities and all that stuff.
Yes.
Even some of your students now are rigging up their own sled to push.
It's crazy, pushing cars.
Yeah, man, it's just an awesome form of conditioning. I've really been getting hard on it myself a couple times a week over, like, the past 6 months. And in terms of conditioning, but also in terms of active recovery, really feel myself recover. I'll start off a sled session just sore from the day prior of training, feeling a bit tight, but after the session, blood running through the whole body. I'm moving. Obviously, I'm tired and my legs are shaking, but you're moving and you're feeling like you're going to go to the next session refreshed. And on top of it being a great tool for conditioning, and, like, I think it's a great tool for active recovery as well. I don't know how you guys implement it in terms of doing it with, I know you're having sled contests the other day. That was cool to watch. But are you yourself using it on rest days, or are you doing it on, like, one of your lower upper days?
Yeah, I've kind of done both. The past few weeks, we've just been really busy with pro athletes, and I have a family, so I do a lot of personal training at the gym. So not only do I work in the athletes with Ben, in the gym with athletes with Ben and Derek, but I have a lot of personal clients that I see daily as well. So my schedule is pretty full. So the past month, I've kind of been doing 3 or 4 just full body days a week, where every day I have a little bit of upper and a little bit of lower. And the sled's probably been one of the biggest tools in doing that. One of the things that we found is that, you know, they are great for conditioning. Obviously, like, we know that. Just push one, you'll find out. But just building strength and building strength in parts of the body that aren't easily targeted in the way that sleds do it. You know, like strengthening your feet and ankles, strengthening your core, strengthening your shoulders, strengthening your VMOs and your calf. I mean, it's, you know, just like, I guess, squatting, it's a full body workout. And Ben, myself, and Derek, we don't do the big three that often. We don't squat, bench, or deadlift really at all. I mean, I squat definitely a lot more than they do, but it's amazing to kind of see the carryover that it has. And a lot of people argue that you have to practice something a lot to get good at it, or to lift a lot of weight. And of course, there's like the neurological impact that the more efficient you are in a lift, the more you're going to pull. But for Ben, I mean, he rack pulled like 3 times his body weight. I don't think Ben's ever rack pulled. And maybe he has years ago, but he pulled 3 times his body weight from his knees. I mean, to see something like that is, if most guys tried to do that, they're going to put out their back. Right. So to see just some of the transfer from that, I think is incredible. And it's kind of a bang for your buck. I mean, if you need a full body workout, just go push a sled, and you're going to get everything you need quickly. So yeah, we use it in that way. Yeah, it's I mean, you don't need much for it, right? Like I said, a lot of these guys, we get videos of them pushing their car. Their girlfriend's like got the car in neutral, steering it down the road, and they're just like pushing down the street. And Paula Quinn was like, he wrote a whole book, Applied Strongman for Athletes. He extensively talked about sleds in that book. Louis Simmons is like, we all know Louis Simmons likes doing sleds, kind of in the same manner that you said. They like him more for conditioning and recovery, and nothing in my opinion is going to get you recovered. Like you said, I can come in with feeling sore and stiff, and which is a very rare occurrence. But if I do, I jump on the sled for 5 minutes and I'm just ready to go. It just gets, like you said, it gets the blood pumping and the oxygen in places that probably doesn't get a lot of oxygen. Yeah. And it's just a really great tool that I think, that every gym should have. And again, it's one of the biggest things we use for opening guys' ankles up, because when you have to push that thing, your ankle's fully dorsiflexed, and a lot of these guys have 200, 250, 300 pounds plus the sled on there. That's a lot of weight. So that's a lot of stretch on your calves and on your ankles. So, and on your feet, even guys their feet get sore from it. So, a lot of people probably don't go, oh, push a sled. It'll stretch your ankles out, but that's how we kind of use it as well. So it's a good tool.
And for the quads too, when you're pulling it, backpedaling and pulling it, man, just completely fries the quads, eh? Destroys
them. And that's one of Ben's, I think, biggest recipes for knees. I can't speak on knee injuries too much. I've been fortunate that I've never been an athlete that's really been plagued by any sort of knees or knee injuries, or really I've had an AC joint injury a few years back, but for the most part, I've been relatively healthy. I mean, I've been really healthy. I've never broken anything, never had, I've always been able to train. I don't wake up every day tight with pain anywhere, like in my neck or back. But Ben's had like knee surgeries, and I think the interesting thing about the sled is just the concentric nature, especially going backwards. Yeah. There's essentially no eccentric overload. Yeah. So when you have an acute injury, probably one of the worst things to do for it is to load it eccentrically, because the nervous system is going to freak out. So Ben's kind of figured out, just walk backwards. Can you walk backwards? Yeah. Well, you're on the way to fixing your knees, because, just think of the flow of it, right? Like everything's done kind of in that forward plane, constant like knee hinging, and it's just the reverse of everything that you do. And so I think just getting that blood flow in there, and it's kind of it's a miracle worker. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things. People hate them, but people will go, wow, those sleds like really make my knees feel good, or we kind of use it as preventative measure. Like he uses it a lot for the basketball guys. When they come off the court, they do backwards sled just to get blood flow through those knees, to kind of reverse some of the trauma and all the shock impact to the ankles and the knees and stuff. So it's a super useful tool. So that's just been our experience with it. We've got guys from every sport all over, Olympic weightlifters, CrossFitters, basketball, football, soccer, all doing it, and all kind of getting the benefits and knees are feeling better than ever from it. So it's kind of a cool tool. Of course, if I wasn't at ATG, I've never been really in a gym that's had access to one. So
Yeah.
we're very fortunate that we have that. I mean, Ben at one point wanted to buy a bigger space just so he could have like 10 lanes for sled. So we just bought a butcher.
I've been pulling them out on the gym floor, but I've got like a protective carpet underneath so that it doesn't scratch up the floor.
Yeah.
But at the gym where I work out of, we also have, they call it the tank. It has wheels on it.
Okay.
And it has a lever that makes the resistance pull harder, but it doesn't even come close to the same kind of like friction you get from a real sled on the floor.
Yeah.
So even when you load it on the hardest lever and you're pushing it and you feel it, it's like, man, I still feel like I'm just pushing something on wheels.
Yeah.
And then you go push the prowler and you just feel a totally different mechanism of resistance.
Yeah, I mean, we so we have the sleds that you see in all the videos inside, and then we have Louis Simmons' West Side Butcher, which is like a low high. So
Yeah.
it's got like the normal handles that you see, and then on the opposite side, it's got like the really low handles, like all the way down towards the ground.
Yeah.
And we not this time of year. It's a little brutal to do it this time of year. Not to, you know, it's hot. It's dangerously hot to get guys out, because guys will go out there and they, and we don't need them passing out or anything like that. But it's a brutal one, and it's actually worse. If you do it, you want to go first. Like, not many people are like, yeah, let me go first on sled. But when you do that one, you want to go first, because when the metal heats up on the pavement after getting pushed, it actually makes it a lot harder to push. So if you're like the second, third, fourth guy to go, you're screwed. You're screwed, because it's that friction it heats up and it just gets harder to push. So yeah, they're fun.
So as busy as you are now, how has your daily routine changed, or what kind of daily routine do you have now for yourself? Like, do you have a morning routine?
I start with clients on some days now as early as 6 a.m. and on some days I'm there as late as 7:30, 8 o'clock. So my days are drawn out between personal clients, my own training, and then the athletes that we get in the gym. Some days are long. So my training is usually in the afternoon. And I think the most fascinating thing is that, to be totally honest with you and with everybody who's going to see this, in the past year, I've probably stretched twice. And I've not lost really any range. I mean, we did a photo shoot yesterday, and Ben was like, yeah, Jeff, just do head to toe. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, like, we'll see. And then when we went out to do it, warmed it up and, did a few movements because we filmed some other stuff. And then I did head to toe. Nice. It's not something that I've trained in. It's not something I've trained in almost 2 years. And I haven't really stretched or done anything in 1 year, except for like a lot of the exercises that we utilize as part of the ATG system. And that's one of the biggest tools, I think, for us, is we place a lot of emphasis on a lot of these traditional secondary eccentric focused movements: RDL, Jefferson curl, seated good morning, split squats. Like, these are all things that in most people's programs are secondary or tertiary. They don't pay a lot of attention to them. They don't get a lot of focus. It's just kind of thrown in there like, oh, let's kind of just do these after we squat or deadlift or bench, and cross bench pullovers. And so we use a lot of this stuff, and that's the primary stuff. That's a lot of those are what I guess you can say our ATG basics or fundamentals system is kind of based on, is all these movements. I could pick the strongest athlete on the field, and if you come in and you do a split squat and you do a Jefferson curl or cross bench or whatever, these guys are going to be tight in every single one of these movements. So we've just compiled the list just from experience. Yeah. You every once in a while you'll get it, but as far as the range, no. And we take split squats. Like, it's kind of like Ben posts probably a thing on split squats every other day, but it's kind of become the biggest movement. And in terms of flexibility, I'll say it's easily, for my hip flexors, one of the best movements for, I can't speak on increasing my flexibility because I had the flexibility already, but definitely maintaining it without any extra work, really, to
building
splits.
Building that strength in those passive ranges, right?
Yeah, we really focus on, you know, some guys split squat and they still kind of turn it into a lunge where they like bend the back leg. Well, we
Right.
try to like, you're trying to keep that back leg as straight as you can, really activate the glute. Think about pulling the leg back behind you, you know, really stretching out the hip flexor. So even though there's a lot of Poliquin people out there who use the movement, they don't use it quite the same way or for quite the same reason. And they surely, like, a lot of them will settle for front foot elevated or whatever. But we really try to get our guys to the floor and our girls with the back foot elevated. So, and they squat more and they feel better. And, you know, so that's
split squat, ATG split squats has been a game changer for me. Like, initially talking to you about it was like, oh yeah, I mean, I've done split squats before or whatever.
Yeah.
And then kind of seeing the aspect of having the back leg straight, increasing the activation of the hip flexor and getting that more engaged.
Yep.
For me, it's been a game changer in terms of increasing my strength through my flexibility. But yeah, super humbling going through it in that range of motion when you think that, okay, well, I can squat this much, and then you put yourself through that active range, and a little bit of an eye opener there.
Yeah, I think for anybody, I mean, you know, I do work with some flexible athletes, and especially more recently, some women that have come in that were gymnasts and, you know, years ago, but are still really flexible. But then when you put them into any of these positions where they need to demonstrate their strength through that range of motion, it's almost not there. It's not even close. And I won't call her out, but I just had a girl recently who came in and could do the splits. Like, hey, get in the splits. Okay, cool, no problem. You know, could take a nap there. But then if you try to get her to do a suspended splits, I mean, it wasn't even close. I mean, we had to go basically all the way up. I mean, she was too, you know, it wasn't anywhere near close to what she could demonstrate passively. And of course, you know, knee problems and all these different things. And so, you know, I think that's the biggest misnomer that a lot of coaches have when it comes to flexibility is that, look, we're not trying to just develop these like hypermobile contortionists. And if we were, a lot of these athletes have a long way to go if that were the case. Mm-hmm. What we're trying to do is, and I think where people miss the boat is that, you know, you get these football coaches that are like, don't go do yoga because, you know, you're going to become flexible and then you're going to get hurt. Well, okay, I agree with that. Why do I agree with that? Well, because if you're going to lift like a powerlifter, and again, I'm not trying to offend powerlifters. I love powerlifting. I think it's an incredible sport. And, you know, these guys could move a house with their bare hands. You know, these guys are strong. But if you're going to lift like that in an athletic culture where you're taking young guys, young boys and girls now, and putting them through pretty much just those three movements, squat, deadlift, and a bench press, 50% of the time they're not even using full depth or their form looks like shit. And then they go do yoga. Yeah, you're just creating a recipe. You're just putting fuel on the fire. You know what I mean? You're already tight. You're strong, but tight. And so, yeah, so if you go do some yoga, but you keep lifting like a power lifter, you're going to continue to create this huge gap between where you're strong and where your body is able to go into as far as its, you know, its range of motion. I don't even really like passive range of motion. I think it's also kind of misleading, but we'll use it just because it does separate kind of the difference, I guess you could say, between mobility and flexibility. I'm on board with the people who say there's no difference. To me, there is no difference. There shouldn't be. You know, mobility is like your strength through that range. Well, no, I think if you were doing the splits, you need to be strong in the splits. Right. I don't think there's maybe a small acceptable difference, but there shouldn't be a huge acceptable difference between what those two things mean.
No, I don't think you even see that difference until you start getting into like the more, I don't want to say extreme side of flexibility, but maybe someone like myself where I've really chased the middle split really hard and some over splits, but things that not necessarily you would be, you know, looking to send a pro athlete in that direction.
Yeah.
You get someone to do a split, it requires a certain amount of strength, but I mean, yeah, there's going to be more strength required to go into more extreme side of flexibility.
100%. And
for sure.
And it's not applicable. You know, I'm not even out there to tell you like, yo, every athlete needs to do the splits. Like that's not realistic. Right. But I will say that I'm telling you, a lot of these guys just get down into one and they're just shocked. it's not because we haven't tried. It's not something that we've been necessarily working for. They just, I don't use it in terms of, especially with athletes, hey, we're going to work on our front splits routine, because immediately their brain is just going to shut off. They're like, yep, no, we're not. So, no, we're going to do our quad and our hamstring and our calf routine today. And little do they know, time comes along, they're consistent, and then there they are. They're in a split, and of course I have, for some of the athletes, especially the girls that are, I want to do my splits, fine, we'll work on your splits specifically. But, I think your very basic splits can be achieved with, I don't want to say indirect work, but if you're training properly, you can devote a lot less time to quote unquote stretching than you think.
Right.
And I think that in with our system, that's kind of what we found is if it was one way or the other, like if you just got really strong stretching, well, then yogis would be like the strongest guys in the gym. And if you got really flexible lifting, well, then, every guy who picks up a weight should be able to lift his shoulders over his head and touch his toes, and let alone even do the splits. And on both sides, it's never usually the case. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, I think, our unique approach is that we do both to encourage the development of both equally. So when you stretch, you're going to do this strength training movement or exercise with that newly acquired range. That's why we did it. Right. And so, the split squat, you can't just split squat and get all the way down to the floor. If that was the case, everyone who's ever split squatted would be able to do it on the floor. So maybe we do need to do a little extra hip flexor work, or a little bit of, more glute work, or, again, it can come, we can go down the rabbit hole because each athlete's individual, but, some need more, some need less. So that's kind of the thing for me, is that, yes, I think a lot of these strength coaches, the way they train their athletes, they are right that, hey, you shouldn't just go do yoga, because what's going to happen is, this guy is going to bench press, probably block bench press, so not even all the way to his sternum. And then he's going to go in yoga and stretch his shoulders. And then if he's an offensive lineman, he goes to hit somebody or push him with his arms, and his shoulder goes back behind into a range that he's not lifted in. Yeah. Then you're probably going to tear your labrum or tear a pec, or whatever. And I could give many examples like that, but it's really simple. And so that's what we kind of try to do, is if you have the mobility, we want to build the strength up in that as possible. And of course, now there's all of these different methods. There's end range strength training, and there's a couple guys out there that have shown, like, you could just use traditional strength training if you do it correctly. You don't have to do a lot of end range strength. But like you said earlier, I think if you're working towards over splits and things like that, you're definitely going to have to use some unique exercises to really pinpoint that range, because nothing is going to get that range. And so you have, if you're going to be smart about it, you're going to get strong in it. So you need to do certain movements. But like Emmett, I went from like doing Coach Summers stretching, where it's like 20 stretches, right? And then talking to Emmett, and Emmett's like, for about 95% of my athletes, I use two movements for middle splits. And I'm just like, like, what? 2 movements? Like, that's all I got to do is 2 movements. And sure enough, like, again, he's another guy who talks the talk but walks the walk. You know what I mean? Right. And so that's kind of, I think there's a place for both. It depends on the athlete. It depends on what the goals are. So, we use it all. We're not like, this is the only way, or this is the only way, or, whatever. And for guys that don't even agree with the way we do things, that's fine. Like, that's okay. I'm okay with that. But a lot of those guys come around. They're like, man, like, we've had people sign up and then quit, and then sign up again, and then quit, and then sign up again, and then they're like, oh man, like, this time I really stuck with it, and I'm seeing all these results. And I mean, again, you can just check our website, and we post tons of success stories, and these are directly from the people. We don't put like, Yeah, my knees feel great. Larry D from Ohio. You know what I mean? No, this is the message that he sent to our grading team, or to one of us directly, me, Ben, or Derek, and that's, the results just speak for themselves. So I don't have to spend a lot of time. I mean, geez, a lot of people jump on our pages and we don't do anything. Our members, our ATG fam, as they are known, will jump on there and defend it for us, because they have the experience with the results.
Yeah.
So and for most of these guys, stretching is a big game changer for them. And a lot of it can be attributed to stretching. I mean, of course, we have a nickelback pro football player, Leonard Johnson. I'm sure some people will be familiar with who he is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the guy's been 9 years in the league. He was undrafted. I mean, this guy played 9 years in the league. The average NFL career is 3 years.
3 years.
Drafted. We're talking an undrafted walk-on who's played 9 years in the league. And I don't know his exact numbers. I'll just say his 40 apparently was not that impressive. Probably still runs faster than me, but for the NFL, his 40 is not that impressive. And I know when I started with ATG last year, I had worked with Leonard a little bit prior to me starting with ATG. And then, of course, I started working with Ben. And then I think about 2 or 3 months after that, Leonard had been doing a lot of stretching that he'd never really done before. This didn't exist as part of Ben's philosophy until I came along in the sense that it exists now. And to date, he ran his fastest 40 going out for his 9th year in the league. We're talking coming out of high school, he ran his fastest 40 at 28, 29 years old, something like that. And guess what he did a couple hours before he went out on the field to run his 40?
What?
He sat in his room and stretched for an hour.
Yeah.
Say what you wanted to say about it.
Yeah.
There's obviously many other factors. Ben's been working with him for a long time, I think about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
But for him to run his fast, and of course Ben's methods have evolved over the years, and Ben's a phenomenal coach.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned a lot from him. But there's a lot to be said about that. And he brought some guys down from Buffalo Bills this past offseason, and he was on their ass, and he made sure they stretched. And Leonard was always over, when he was done with his workout, he was getting his stretches in. I mean, he takes it very seriously. So, again, we have a lot of guys that it's the same thing. I was told not to stretch. I was told stretching is bad for you. I was told stretching make me run slower or jump less high, and they're jumping higher and running faster and feel better and lifting heavier and lifting harder. And, try to argue that. You know what I mean? You can't really.
No, for sure, man. Moving a little bit outside that conversation and just kind of talking about, I guess, who are your 2 biggest influences right now outside of ATG? If you had to pick 2.
Ooh. My 2 biggest influences. I think Emmett Lewis. Emmett Lewis is probably he's the one guy that as soon as I get a chance to go train with, I'm going.
Yeah.
I missed him, unfortunately, in Toronto. He was he never gets over here. Yeah. And I had the opportunity. Yeah, I mean, I talked to him a little bit, and apparently it's hard to get to the States and do seminars and stuff, like with the green card and the taxes and all this stuff. They make it kind of difficult. So he doesn't really he hasn't been to the United States as far as I know. I think Kit Laughlin's kind of the same way. Like they've never
been
really
to Canada a few times too.
Yeah, but they've never been down here.
Yeah.
So, flexibility doesn't come our way, man. It's kind of sad. Yeah, I mean, he's easily my biggest influence in part of my evolution into how I think about it and how I approach it. And he's just been very open with me. I teach I have my own thing going, and we have our own members, and I I think we don't really compete for the same market. You know, he's very much in like the circus gymnastics world.
Yeah.
People don't know it, but he knows a lot about traditional strength training. He knows as much as anybody else knows, if not more, about it. He just doesn't market it because it's not really his, you know, I guess his niche as far as like who looks to him for advice. And so he's very open with me about how he does things and his experiences with things. And he kind of likes going back and forth with us because there's not a lot of gyms that train pro athletes that are going to test stretching or these methods or these, you know, that are stretching, let alone the dynamic stretching and the loaded stretching and Jefferson curls and all these things that we use that we constantly kind of get questioned for. He's a big fan of it, and I'm a big fan of him. So we go back and forth a lot. And as soon as I get the chance, I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm just going to fly over to Europe and go train with him because he's definitely one of the best that I've come across. And I've read a lot of stuff from a lot of people over the years, kind of in my own quest for knowledge, and both in strength training and flexibility. And the interesting thing about flexibility is there's not a lot of information out there about it. Not the way that strength training is researched, not the way that, you know, even if you ask people here, it's yoga, you know, oh, it's yoga. And there's nothing wrong with yoga. Obviously Western yoga and Eastern yoga is like very different. But he shared a lot of stuff with me. I mean, he shared a lot of stuff. He even gave me some, I have to share them with you. They're these really cool WordPress documents that.
Are those the monk ones?
Yeah. They were like.
Yeah. You sent those.
Did I send those to you? Yeah.
Yeah, they're insane.
They're like in Chinese, but some guy took the time to like, you know, to put them into English and you know, just reading it is like.
There's so much stuff in there.
So much gold in there, and you know, and it talks a lot about the head to toe and a lot of other flexibility. But even to learn that these guys did like a lot, like yoke carries and a lot of heavy carries, and you know, when you think of like Shaolin monks and stuff, you don't think of strongman training, but they utilize a lot of like strongman style training, and so it's kind of a fascinating thing to read about. But just in general, there's just not a lot like. Really diving into the rabbit hole of like flexibility and developing it in terms of performance, not just in terms of, you know, demonstration, I guess you could say. Not a lot of people go that route. And so you know, Emmett is huge. Kit Laughlin is another one that if I'm gonna read anything from anybody, Kit Laughlin is definitely going to be one. He's probably a little bit the reality for like if I tried to tell some of my athletes to go check out Kit Laughlin, they'd be like, who is this old hermit guy who like you know, like they just wouldn't register because they don't really, but Emmett's kind of like brazen, and he kind of says some things that are like, wow, I can't believe he just said that. And he like calls people out on things, and, you know, he's not afraid to really like speak about things that, you know, he feels, and I think people can appreciate that. But I think if there's anybody else, which is probably the whole reason we're even having this conversation right now, is you. I mean, you know, you're for the past 5 or 6 years, man, if I've ever had questions or if I've ever had these crazy ideas or, you know, we've always gone back and forth. I mean, Instagram probably doesn't even have enough like memory to backlog all the conversations that we've had. And, you know, we all have those moments where we're up in our training and down in our training and confused in our training. And so, you know, if even the other day you did that pigeon squat, man, like all of us in ATG, every single guy, I mean, you should have seen some of these guys in there trying to do this pigeon squat. I mean, I'm talking like, again, 6'8" basketball players that are just like, holy shit, like, how did he do that? And we're all in there just trying to figure it out, you know? And it's, so I mean, you're a big influence on me, and and a lot of people. You know, we have a lot of the same circle, you know, just from the communities that we've been involved in before. And so, you know, I know that definitely for me, you're a huge influence, and definitely for a lot of others, you're a huge influence. And so it's kind of cool to take this platform that we have and just kind of be real about what we do and why we do it, and
for sure, man,
and share it with other people. Genuinely. I think that's kind of the cool part. And I've met a lot of great people through what I do. So I'm fortunate. I mean, this is what I do for a living. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I feed a family off this. I pay all my bills and then some. So it's a cool experience that I'm grateful to have, and you've been a big part of that. So yeah.
So how has having your boy changed your life?
It's obviously for the best, and no parents are gonna get on here and be like, "Man, life sucks." You know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, man. Some days I just want to some days I'm gonna go for a long walk,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but every day is new, every day is a joy, and I think the biggest eye opener for me was just how much they're constantly watching and learning, and just to see him excited in things because I'm excited in them, or he does things because I do them. You have to watch yourself once you get to a point. You finally have that day where you're just kind of like, that guy watches everything that I do and hears everything that I say, and he's going to try to repeat all of it. Yeah. So let me try to do some more inspiring things in front of this child because, I take him to the gym, man, and he just, I don't want to say that I was a baseball player. I was a baseball player for 15 years, and I really loved baseball a lot. I don't know if a lot of people are like baseball, baseball, but there was just something about the sport and about the game that was really, really cool, and maybe it's the heritage or the camaraderie or the group factor that you're with a bunch of guys that are kind of doing the same thing. But I played for 15 years, and at times I think I don't want to say my dad forced me, but it kind of was like, you're a pussy if you don't keep playing baseball, or come on, man, get it together. And I don't ever want to force my child to do something.
Yeah.
So if he comes to me as like, yeah, Dad, I don't really want to, play sports or whatever, I'm gonna be sad. But at the same time, it's like, I think if you just set an example, which I try to do, they're just gonna follow that path. You don't have to force them. As long as the relationship's good, like I said, I take him in there. He does things. I mean, he randomly wants to. He doesn't want to ride in his stroller. He wants to push his stroller. He doesn't want to just go to the park and run around. He wants to climb the highest thing up, and that's how I was. Let me just try to climb the highest object here and jump off from it, or it's nerve-wracking at times, man, because you're like, this is a little kid, and he just wants to do it all, and he's picked up the soccer ball, and he's gone to the gym, and he wants to push the sled, he wants to get on the treadmill, he wants to do pull-ups on the rings. So he's definitely interested, and I think that it's cool to be in a position where you're active and your children see that, especially in I don't want to get into, but especially in today's society. There's so much time in front of the screens. I drive through a residential neighborhood. I never see a kid outside on the street riding a bike or shooting a basketball anymore. So that's kind of what I want my kid to do. I just went with him yesterday, actually, to Sky Zone. Do they have those in Canada?
Is that
the trampoline? No, this is like
like a trampoline gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
It's called Get Air.
Okay. All right.
It's just full of tramps. Every time we go there, I'm like, I'm gonna blow my knee out.
Yeah, dude. I probably had more fun than anybody in that gym, including all the children there. I had so much fun. This one had a bouldering wall and Ninja Warrior course, and of course just tons of trampolines and basketball and all this. And he loved it, man. I mean, I could have left him there for 6 hours, and he just would have just ran all over the place. So, it's definitely life changing, but it changes your training. Especially if you want to spend time with your family. Before him, I could spend an hour training here, an hour training here, an hour training here, and sometimes I'd come home and I'd just do when Nikki was pregnant with him, I was at home just doing handstands and stretching and for hours, because it's and then when he was born, because what else am I gonna do? I can't go to the gym with him, right? So I got to do what I can do. So now that I'm back in the gym, and I actually have another one on the way, So I'll have 2 boys.
Oh,
Yep, I'll have 2 boys.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. So I'll have 2 boys. So that's going to be exciting. So I'll have a doubles tennis team. And yeah, so I think that's just kind of my workouts need to be efficient. You know, I'm not a professional athlete. I don't make millions of dollars a year to take care of my body and to play sports. You know, I do coach them for a living and I train obviously, but I've really had to get smart about what I'm doing and be efficient about what I'm doing and do the things that are going to give me the best bang for my buck, both in terms of getting stronger and feeling healthier and being flexible and kind of encompassing all of those things. I mean, I just had a conversation with a friend today who takes a gymnastics class, and one of the coaches said to him, like, yeah, you kind of have to be strong or you have to be flexible. You can't be both. And that's kind of like the thing that I'm out to prove wrong. I'm not the most flexible guy out there. Trust me, there's a lot of guys more flexible than me, and I'm not the strongest, but I'm pretty strong and I'm pretty flexible and I don't have a bad day.
Yeah.
Which a lot of these guys can't say that they don't. You know, I'm pain-free. I'm never hurt. I train to full intensity a lot. You know, just the other day we like got crazy and was like, hey, let's see how fast we can run in a cold sprint. So like, so we all got on there just cold. None of us had warmed up, nothing. They were like, okay, your first one, we're going all out. Like, what is the fastest we can get on this air runner cold? And I felt great. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not telling anybody that they should go do that. But again, I'm kind of like, we're our own guinea pigs. Like, we literally almost, I don't want to say try to injure ourselves, but we push things to the limit that people say that you can't do this or you shouldn't do this because you're going to get hurt or because it's risky or whatever. And I think we've just done such a great job developing a resiliency within our body through such a large range of motion, especially compared to most athletes that we train, that on any given, I mean, Ben's jumping higher and higher and he runs fast. And it's kind of the proof is there. You know, it's not like guys are getting flexible in our gym and are getting slower and jumping not as high. Like there's not a single one. So it's time to just kind of change this idea that flexibility is only for certain disciplines of sport. And, you know, and if you do it, you're going to get hurt and slow and whatever. I think it's just like, it's extremely misleading and it's extremely irresponsible. I mean, this is being taught from a young age. So it's, in my opinion, it's just unethical. You know, if I don't know something, I'm not going to pretend like I know it. I'm either going to say, I don't know, or I'm going to say, let me try to find out and give you what information I can get from it. Or I'm going to find somebody who does know, and then I'm going to get you in connection with them, and you find out from them what it is that you're looking for. But but I'm not going to, you know, no football coach in America should be telling an athlete anything about flexibility because they know nothing about it. So that's just the bottom line. And you know, I mean, we're seeing now injury rates in kids are skyrocketing. For many reasons. Mobility is a huge one. You know, sports specificity is another one. Diet is another. You know, there's a lot of factors, of course, but a lot of these factors are like, if they have one of these, they almost have all of them in our experience, in my experience. So, I mean, people don't even understand that diet plays a role on your flexibility and your mobility.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of food, what kind of quality food are you putting in your body is going to determine like the inflammatory levels of your body. And you know, I know for a fact just from years of experience, if I have a rough week, like home wise or just like, you know, whatever, long days or stressed out, I'm not as flexible.
Yeah.
If I have easygoing weeks, I feel good. You know, I just had a couple hours on the beach. I go home and stretch. Man, I'm flexible. So, you know, there's a lot of factors that determine it too. So yeah, it's really interesting. And a lot of people think I've always been flexible. So I think that's the other thing I kind of want to clear the air on is I have not always been flexible.
I was kind of with you.
I'm sure you remember.
I remember, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people are like, oh, like
the thing with you though, like I was so impressed by how quickly you became flexible. It was
Yeah.
like, you know, I had spent so much time, and I mean, I look, there's some advice that I could probably give to myself, you know, 5 years ago, that there's some things I would say to that person that
Right.
maybe would have progressed myself a little. But man, you unlocked some moves so quickly. It was,
Yeah, I don't know if it was just determination. You know, like, it's funny because you said muscle ups, man. Like, people ask me all the time. They're like, because that's kind of at first what I was kind of known for, I guess you could say. Like,
yeah,
I just like did muscle ups all the time.
muscle ups.
It's because it was like, I remember the first time I saw it being done, and of course, like, it was on YouTube, and there was like some crazy sick edit, and it was like all this cool music, and they slowed it down, and it just like made the muscle up look like the coolest thing in the world, right? And I was like, I just remember going to that park every single day. I'm gonna do a muscle up. I'm gonna do a muscle up. I'm gonna do a muscle up. And I did rep after rep, you know, pull up after pull up, dip after dip, you know, tried all these different things that they said. And I remember one day I just went out there, and I had never done one yet. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pull on this bar as hard as I freaking can, and I'm going to try to do a muscle up. And I pulled on that bar as hard as I could, and I did a muscle up. And it just clicked. And I was just like, wow, like, I just wasn't pulling hard enough. You know, like, I wasn't training that very specific, like, I didn't have my attention on that very specific aspect of the muscle up. And what's crazy is I learned the bar muscle up before I learned the ring muscle up. And if you've done any sort of like reading, it's usually the other way around.
Yeah, for sure.
So same kind of as with my flexibility. You know, when I first started doing it, I didn't buy into it fully. I was like, okay, like, sure, like, yeah, I'm gonna get more flexible. You know, it's just kind of like, again, I was one of those athletes that I had maybe done 2 yoga classes prior to that in my life, like after CrossFit or whatever, and going with like some girl or something, and be like, yeah, like the only reason I really went was because of her or something. And of course, the whole time I'm standing there looking like a fool because I can't do anything that anybody in that room can do. And that was kind of my first exposure to flexibility. And I was like, screw this. Like, flexibility is not for me. And so I kind of had that in my head for years. And then it wasn't until the gymnastic body system that I got my first taste of it. And again, I didn't fully buy into it. It was kind of just like, oh, I'll play with it here and there, and I'll kind of do it like when I want, and we'll see what happens, right? And then about 4 to 6 weeks, I'll say, I was when I first noticed some change. I was like, oh, it's a little easier to get into this. It doesn't feel quite as bad. Maybe I feel like I'm a little deeper in it than I was like prior to. And then it just kind of hooked me from there. Once I started seeing the progress and not really realizing the benefits, but starting to understand the benefits at the time, it hooked. And then I was just like, I'm going to get flexible. I'm going to get my splits. Like, I'm just one of those extreme, like, oh, I'm going to go sprint on that treadmill cold. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how I approach things. And it's a blessing and a curse because I can get so lost into something that like, it's going to be hard to pull me out. But at the same time, you know, again, I was one of those guys that like couldn't touch my toes. I probably wasn't the least flexible guy in the room, but I wasn't flexible by anybody's standards. Like I said, I couldn't do a yoga class and probably do not even half of what they were doing in there without being highly uncomfortable or wobbling all over the place, or just flat out not being able to get into the movement to like being able to touch my head to my toe. And you know, I think the biggest thing is consistency and just trusting the process.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of, it's like so cliche, like, trust the process, be consistent, but people don't really know what that means. You know what I mean? Like, people are like, yeah, I was consistent for 4 weeks. Or I've gotten as bad as like, Jeff, I'm like not getting improvements on my flexibility. You know, what can I do? Like, and I'm like, well, how long have you been doing our stretching? A week. And I'm just like, oh no. You know, I'm just like, man. So, you know, what's a WhatsApp message becomes like a WhatsApp call. Like, look, man, we gotta really break down your understanding of what this is going to take and what you're about to take on, because this is not going to happen in a week. It's not to say like, we get tons of guys that like have had knee pain their whole life and they do one exercise and the next thing they have no knee pain. Like, we've had some crazy stories. But flexibility is just not one of those things where like you're just going to be flexible. It takes time. Some it takes longer than most, and I think Emmett, the timeline I always got from Emmett was like 18 months is a good amount of time. If you don't have any injury history, if you don't have any structural, issues, surgeries, or anything like that, like 18 months is a good timeline to really like get close to your splits. If you're like serious about your flexibility, if you do it week in, week out, month after month, for that amount of time. And I just don't think people understand that. And again, there is the consensus that, oh, it's genetic, or oh, it's for girls, or guys don't have the the mobility to do these things because we're men. And it's like, where do you even come up with this stuff? Like, I think it's been proven that, and again, Emmett, I'll say Emmett again because I believe it's him I heard from, but I think not everybody can get like all the way taint to floor down in a middle split, but you can get respectably close to where no one with the naked eye is going to know that it's any different. Yeah. But other than that, flexibility is capable of everybody. It's everyone can do it. You just have to train correctly. Yeah. And you can do it. And it's not for women. I mean, we all say it jokingly, but we're all very serious. Like, I feel like I don't age. I feel like I'm getting younger because my training gets smarter. I'm getting more flexible. I just feel better. And most guys that are training can't say that. Most guys can't say, I feel better every year in, year out with my training. They generally feel worse. They're sore. Their joints are sore. Even advanced flexibility practitioners, their joints get jacked up. They get sore. They get injured. Yeah. Flexibility is not like this golden ticket to pain-free, injury-free life because you can do it incorrectly. Which I think is why, for anybody who's getting into it, you need to find somebody who knows what they're talking about. And in terms of flexibility, there's not a lot of people out there who actually know what they're talking about. There's a handful of people that I would send people to for advice outside of myself, because they just don't have the experience. They don't have the results to back it up, or they just haven't done it themselves, which Emmett and Kit and all these people that I've learned from are not only teachers, but practitioners themselves of what they teach. So not only can they tell you what they've done for themselves, but they can tell you what their athletes have done. And it's not always the same exact thing. There's going to be a lot of commonalities, like between, there's obviously like a baseline, and from there you tweak it for each individual. The same way strength, you put any beginner on any program, they're going to progress. But then there's just a point where you have to start to individualize things a little more based on the way that person perceives things, or trains, or sees things, or sleep, or just feels there's a lot of factors that can contribute to it, that I think are super important. And again, like, I've had people come in, oh, my yoga teacher just pushed down on my knees, or my gymnastics teacher just sat on my back while I did stretching, or like whatever. Like, these are surefire ways to get somebody injured. Like, you want to your 150-pound teacher sat on your 60-pound 8-year-old's back to get them into a split. Like, you're just sitting there thinking to yourself, like, that's crazy. And then again, like, you get these young kids to come into the gym, and of course they look at me and they're like, who's this bulky, bearded looking guy? And like, what does he know about flexibility? Like, what is that guy going to teach me about flexibility? And of course they can't. Again, you put them in any sort of isometric split or suspended split, they are not strong in these splits. I mean, these are problems that your child starts to, like, they may not feel it now, but over the years, I've spoken and worked with enough older ballerinas and gymnasts and that are hip injuries and knee injuries and whatever, because they're so mobile and they're not strong. Mm-hmm. So, again, to reiterate, you have to have both. You need to have both. And to have the idea that you can't have both is ridiculous. I mean, there's several athletes out there that are, look at some of the highest profile Olympic weightlifters in the world. They can all do their splits and they lift more than you and I combined. Mm-hmm. They're like, if they can do it, anyone can do it. There's no excuse. The only excuse is that you're just not doing the work, or you don't have the right information to do the work that's necessary.
Right.
So that's, that's kind of, I think, the basis and the underlying problem of flexibility in the athletic world is that people just don't have the right information.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, is why it's so important to get the ATG methodology out there, is because our market is generally these team sport type of athletes, and it's totally against what they've ever been told. And these are the guys who need it most. I don't need to tell you as much as I need to tell, the basketball player who walks into my gym, because you understand it a lot more than they do. And not only do you understand it a lot more, but you have the right information, whereas they have the wrong information that you kind of have to strip from them first before you get them to trust in what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And anymore, just walking into the ATG gym is enough. They see these guys and what they can do, and the way they feel, and that sells them. I mean, that's just kind of a year ago it was a lot harder than it is today. Now it's these guys fly down, one-way tickets, train with us for 4 to 6 weeks. They're all in, and it's been really fun. So I'm very fortunate to be part of ATG and to have teamed up with Ben and Derek. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I think that flexibility is crucial. I think it's important, for the longevity of just your body and in your sport, but also just for your mind. Nothing chills me out like a nice, put my headphones in and just get on a yoga mat and stretch for an hour, maybe that and a cup of rice, and I'm going to sleep really well.
Yeah.
So, if anything, like, just that is probably going to have more benefits than what a lot of these athletes are doing. Like, if you just stretch to sleep better, to just relax, like, the benefits are going to be overwhelming. So, we're out to, like, kind of change the way people see it and perceive it, at least in the world that I'm in now. Because I'm not in the gymnastics world per se anymore. I'm not really in the circus or movement culture or whatever. I'm not really in that realm as much anymore. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people are dismantling and kind of doing what you're doing, what Keegan Smith is doing with Real Movement Project, and just kind of utilizing everything, and not only utilizing everything for themselves, but utilizing everything for young athletes who play team sports. I mean, if you would have told me 10 years ago when I played baseball that juggling was going to help me be a better baseball player, I would have laughed at you. But now I believe it, or told me to stretch or any, you can't even get a baseball player to lift a weight practically. So to do any of these kind of things, it's like, we're in a cool community, I think, of a lot of people with the same mindset that are really changing the way this game is going to be played, and they're gonna what they're teaching in universities and stuff you're gonna have to change it. I mean, it's outdated. Some of it's just flat out incorrect. I've had buddies who've like, man, I took my my test, my final for kinesthesiology, or I got my PhD in biomechanics or something. I had to flat out like lie on my thesis, knowing that like these guys are looking for a certain answer, but I actually know that this is the real answer, but I almost kind of have to suppress the truth and like what I know, because if I don't, I'm not going to graduate from school. I mean, that's kind of
crazy.
It's messed up, it's messed up. So, and again, it's like, that's kind of why people hated Poliquin, and even Coach Summers we all know how Coach Summers is, man. You got to love the guy because he's bold, man. I mean, he went out and just like challenged probably the biggest fitness community in the planet in history. And, but people respected him for it. And at the end of the day, now there's people going, yeah, man, you know what? You're right. Like, my shoulders are screwed up. My knees are screwed up. My hips are screwed up. I probably shouldn't have been doing 90% of the things that I was doing. And again, for CrossFit, for me, I don't have anything wrong. I don't think anything's wrong with CrossFit. I think CrossFit's great, except for coming from the experience and the platform I have now, is a lot of these guys do not have the mobility or flexibility to be doing the things that they're doing. Yeah. And if they just did that, CrossFit's great. But, and again, it's anybody. I think football players should stretch, basketball players should stretch, swimmers, baseball players, gymnasts. Like, I think it's an athletic quality. It's not reserved for a certain discipline over here or over here. I think it is part of and should be part of strength training. It should not be seen separately or differently from what strength training is. And I think that's how you have to approach it. And it's certainly how I've approached it. So yeah, but it's kind of funny because it's like, we because even myself, like, okay, guys, like, we're going to film something this weekend, right? And Derek's like, yeah, I'm going to do bench press. And Ben's like, I'm going to do split squats. And like, Jeff, like, you do the Jefferson curl, or you do the splits, or you do, and I'm like, man, I want to do something cool. I want to do like, I want to like squat a lot of weight, or bench press something, or like take my shirt off and show my abs. And they're like, no, Jeff, you just stretch. And you're kind of like, that's kind of like what I've gotten myself into. But I'm it's kind of coming full circle and circus. And I'm starting to embrace it a lot more. Because, if I have this platform, why not take it and take what I know and educate other people on the benefits of it. Don't reject it so much, because of course, like, again, I'm 6'6", 6'1", like 200 pounds. So when you look at me, if I walk into a yoga room, everyone's going to go, man, this guy is going to be the tightest guy in the room. But now I'd probably be one of the better guys in the room, if not the best, when it comes to that. So it's kind of a fun, that's why, Ben is the one who came up with flexible. I think it was Ben. We all sat down one day and we were like, okay, we need to come up with monikers and like, what is it going to represent about us and what we have to offer to ATG. And Ben already had knees over toes. He probably secretly was born Ben knees over toes and just somewhere along the line, like, lost his name and then just kind of resurfaced. Yeah. And Derek is like, and we knew Derek's a very spiritual individual, and he's just really smart and a wise guy. And he's just like, I'm Mr. Infinity. And cause, like, again, the guy doesn't age. So it's like, I think he's just going to live forever. And so it just fit. And they kind of look at me, and I was the only one that didn't have really like a name. And at the time I was still ring complex, but I wasn't really doing like gymnastics ring stuff anymore. Yeah. And Ben Ben is like the king of puns. So if you've ever like listened to his stories, sometimes you'll hear him and he was just like, flexible. You're the flexible bull with like 2 L's, like a bull. And we were just kind of like, we all just kind of looked at each other and we were like, all right, let's do it. And I was just like, I was like, okay, like, sure. But now, like, people come up to me like at the grocery, hey, you're the flexible. And I'm like, yep, that's me, like, so it is cool, again, because that's like, Ben, when people come to the gym, Ben will point at me and they go, he's the most flexible guy in the gym. And I'm bigger than Ben. I weigh about 15, 20. I probably weigh about 25 pounds more than Ben, and probably only about like 10 or 15 more than Derek. So when people point at me like, that's the guy who knows everything about flexibility, people just kind of go, it's the big guy. Are you screwing with me right now? Like, are you just messing with me, or are you serious? And they're like, no, Jeff, show them the splits. So then I drop down on the splits, and people just go, okay, sign me up. You know what I mean? Like, because if that guy can do it, I can do it. So it is kind of cool. It is cool.
It's been really cool, man. Watching you grow last year has been huge. Yeah, I won't keep you much longer, man. I know you got to get back to the family and stuff, and I can hear the stomping upstairs right now, so I know I'm going to be on call in a sec.
Daddy duty, man. It's a joy. I foresee more flexibility in my future.
Full time, all the time, man. But man, thanks for sitting with me and giving me your time a little more personally than usual. But we'll be in touch, and
always.
I really appreciate it, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to, we've all been trying to get on podcasts. Ben's been on quite a few, like I think about 3 or 4 now. And, they're all like, Jeff, get on a podcast. So when you were like, dude, let's do this thing, I was like, oh, let's do it. I love talking about this stuff. I mean, I could talk for hours, and so it's we'll definitely have to talk again, and it'll be fun to kind of share my experiences, and maybe next time we'll reverse it. you know, I talk to people a lot about you. I talk to the guys at the gym a lot about you. And, you know, when I'm like, yeah, this guy was like a power lifter, and look at him doing the middle splits. And of course, people are just like, wow, you know, like, what? A power lifter doing the middle splits? So it's like, you know, it's fun, man. And we got to get you down here to ATG.
No, for sure.
We got to get you down here. I think you'd have a lot of fun.
That's on my bucket list right now.
Yeah. So, all right, brother.
All right, man.
I appreciate it.